Peterson Lent. I'm the Deputy Executive Director with Generations United, who is hosting the webinar today. And I'll be facilitating the webinar. Before we get started, I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items. One is that we have experienced some challenges with the system during past webinars, so I want to alert you to the fact that there may be a short delay when moving through the slides, but eventually the appropriate slide will appear. Our speakers will keep going and the slides will eventually catch up. If you're having any difficulty hearing, you can listen through your computer speakers, or you can also dial in and listen from your phone. There will be some time for questions and comments at the end. You can also, however, use your question or chat function at any time in your computer screen, and those questions will come to us as the facilitators, and we'll raise them during the Q&A time. So thank you, and with that, we're going to get started. As I mentioned, I'm Jaya Len. I'm the Deputy Executive Director with Generations United, and I've been working with the Seniors for Kids initiative over the past 6 years. And joining me today as a co-presenter is Yvonne Thompson-Friend, who has been our state coordinator for Seniors for Kids in Pennsylvania. So she'll be providing the first on-the-ground perspective from the initiative. For today's agenda, we're going to start with giving a little bit of background about Generations United and our Seniors for Kids work. Then go into why older adults are valuable and logical advocates for children. Then talk a little bit about some simple ways to consider getting started, walk through some tips for success, and then talk about a menu of services that Generations United is making available to Alliance for Early Success Partners. And then finally, a few questions to ask yourself and your organization about whether or not you are ready to be really looking at ways to engage age for advocacy and impact. So to start, a little background on Generations United. We're about 25 years old, and we started at a time where at the federal level you were seeing a lot of talk about pitting the generations against each other. There were headlines in the news, things like Kids versus Canes, that were really pitting young against old. And the thought there was, this is not the best way to be advocating for younger and older people, but we're going to be stronger together. And so we were founded at that time to really look at ways that we can do joint advocacy. And that was a coming together of the National Council on Aging and the Child Welfare League of America. And one of our founders, who headed up National Council on the Aging, said at that time, we formed Generations United to argue for a more caring society, really recognizing that people live in families, so older and younger live together and have mutual interest in supporting each other. Our mission is to really improve the lives of children, youth, and older people through intergenerational approaches, whether it be through policy or programs. We also have a communications approach as well. Ultimately recognizing that working on behalf of those populations benefits all. Our intergenerational work focuses on promoting quality standards for intergenerational programs. We provide technical assistance, and we also encourage the creation of intergenerational programs through seed grants and support of those grants. We do a range of federal level policy advocacy for children and older adults, issues of mutual concern, and we have a whole initiative around supports for grandparents and other relatives raising children. So that's who we are as a whole. Our Seniors for Kids initiative is what we're going to be focusing on primarily together. And again, it recognizes, as this quote highlights, the web of mutual obligations between generations is essential for a civilized society. We believe we're stronger together, and that our impact is amped up when we're working together on behalf of these populations. So Seniors for Kids. Seniors for Kids actually started as a small demonstration in late 2005 in Florida, where we worked there a couple of years looking at this idea of engaging older adults as advocates on behalf of children's issues. We saw potential in the work and some good impact there. So we looked at having an on-the-ground presence and trying to do some more intensive recruitment in certain states. And so over the years, we have had an on-the-ground presence in those states that are highlighted with stars on the map. And I think gained the most traction, particularly in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and New York, and had some good work in New Jersey as well. So those are the places that we have the largest networks. We do, however, have some level of Seniors for Kids membership across the United States in 45 states and the District of Columbia. But in those states, in some cases, it's just a very small number of members, and they're attached to the effort just via the fact that they're on the mailing list to get monthly alerts about different opportunities to engage as an older adult on behalf of young children. So that's a little bit background on who we are, and then I'm going to turn it over to Yvonne to talk about, in her experience and on-the-ground work, why older adults as advocates.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning, California. So Jaya did speak about my background as the Pennsylvania State Coordinator. I want to just add to that information that prior to my Encore career, I was a chief staffer in the state legislature, and so my experience comes from the inside of the legislature and then, an outsider with inside knowledge. And so that combined with the fact that I'm 50 plus and in fact a few minutes away from 60, I'm delighted to talk about why older adults. And some things you'll find are common sense, and some things will be exciting, I believe. Next. So one of the first things I want to emphasize again is this whole perception and truth around the intergenerational conflict. When we began to outreach to our older adults, there was some concern that only older adults only cared about Social Security or keeping a lid on property taxes, and that's true, but there actually is a bigger truth I'd like to talk about. Next. And so the more that connects us, it's pretty clear here, it's a love of art that's happening no matter what age you are. But there are several exercises around pulling out what connects us, and that's part of how you get the best out of your work with older adults for early education. But I want to talk just a little bit more next about the bigger truth of older adults. And it's, yes, they definitely are concerned about Social Security. Older adults often depend on that support for living. But they also have a great concern for children and the need for quality education. One of our retired captains in Pennsylvania talked about the fact that as an NFL, AFL, and CFL player in the past, he now spends his time in the community making plays for the kids. And so in each case, you'll have an older adult talking about why they feel it's important. Obviously, you have some folks on screen who are doing community gardening work. So next. One of the reasons that ideal child advocates are older adults, or let's switch it around, older adults are ideal child advocates. One you would imagine, it's a growing resource. They're a growing resource. In fact, the population today is about 13.3%, the U.S. population, older adults. And that number is anticipated to rise to 20% of the population. And so you have this growing population of folks who have experience as parents and grandparents. And that's a level of credibility, really, that you have to earn over the years. We had a captain speaking at a statewide action event, and his background was fairly diverse. He talked about that
So I think I'll just be continuing the webinar, and we'll try to see if we can.
Our grandparent is validating.
Yvonne, are you there?
Are you back, Chuck? Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah, we
I
lost
am.
you for
You couldn't hear me?
for a minute. We lost you for a minute. We're glad you're back. You can continue.
Okay, great. So that the next two bullets, and we're on the ideal child advocates, really speak about available time and increased dedication to legacy, which I think I'd like to talk about together, because you have these older adults, but they're not all monolithic in terms of, ages. Obviously, you have a wide span. People refer to the baby boomers a lot, but then you have the silent generation and the greatest generation. That whole span of seniors is from 50 to 113. So you can imagine that there are going to be slightly different ways that they approach the work they do. So while there is more available time for some of the older seniors, you also have a increased knowledge of what they do today and how that's going to really impact for their children and their children's children, and there's much more dedication to that. So the recognition around networks for older adults, really, you can see it every day. There are activities that are faith-based. They're attached to Rotary clubs. We had steppers who brought their dancers together and actually did sign-ups. So there are a lot of different networks that older adults get involved in, and they bring their skills and experience, whether it's informal or formal, it's just real knowledge that if you live longer, you're going to know a little bit more, we would think. And so those skills and experience can be applied to your advocacy work. And of course, the voting in greater percentages is common knowledge. 2012 was the first time that seniors actually were the majority voting bloc at the presidential level. But generally, you have 88 to 91% of seniors voting who are registered to vote. So that's a really highly coveted block of folks. Next. And one of the things you want to talk about here, why advocacy, as opposed to doing the bullets, I just want to tell a quick story that I think encompasses the all of the points here. And this story is about one of the captains we worked with who had a background in graphic arts, and she was extremely active in her children's early education experiences, but they had long since grown, and she had become more isolated in her home. We were able to recruit her for Seniors for Kids, and over the development period, she began to gain, more power in her voice. She was speaking out on policy issues, really feeling more confident about the ability to have a strong position and to speak to others. And as we continued, she began to organize her neighbors. She would meet with the legislators, and she's now in regular contact with decision makers. And I believe that that's just one example of how overall involvement in Seniors for Kids actually has these other impacts that you hadn't even anticipated, I guess, positively so. Next. And the benefits, you won't be surprised that the benefits really kind of connect to the appeal, right? So the ability to transfer your skills and knowledge, which we talked about, and the isolation, the ability to actually reduce isolation by involving yourself with others. We ran into an extremely powerful example where a captain's grandson had been killed the day before an event that he was scheduled to speak at. And he decided to go ahead and speak. And the kind of return from people in the audience who recognized how powerfully he felt about this organization, that he would come the day after. And he wanted to make that plea for focus on the children, for investment in the children. And happened that some elected officials heard about that and asked him to come and really sit down and talk to them about the benefits of older adults. So all of this involvement brought about these other outcomes. And I guess I want to say that burning the 20% calorie works for me. Next. So unleashing the power is what we really talked a bit about with regard to the captains there. But in reality, when you think about, unleashing power is always a good thing. In this case, we're talking about older adults unleashing power for early education advocacy. Once you add that additional capacity, particularly for elected officials who already understand the numbers on this, they know what this population with the constituency looks like, you're going to bring more increased capacity to your efforts. Next. So we have something that Jaya, I know, will talk about, and everybody will agree, Margaret Mead.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a terrific quote from Margaret Mead saying somehow we need to get older people back closer to growing children if we're going to restore the sense of community, knowledge of the past, and sense of the future. So this obviously points to the direct benefits that children get from direct contact with older adults. But I think in addition to that, we know that the more connection that older adults have with children, the more likely they are to become some of the fiercest advocates for children. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about, if you're looking at engaging older adults in work, thank you, where do we begin? So when we think about beginning this work, we of course encourage you to begin where you are. Many of you, most likely, there are already older adults within your organizations doing some sort of role working on behalf of children. Perhaps in a very professional way. It may be you. It may be other folks that are providing some sort of support services in the organization or at a volunteer level out in the field. But just start thinking about who do you already have engaged that is an older adult. And perhaps you know what their professional interest is in this, but you haven't tapped into talking about their personal interest in this. Are they a grandparent themselves? And so do they have a keen interest in it from that perspective? So start thinking about what networks you already have, even if it hasn't been those that you've recruited intentionally from an older adult standpoint. So assess a little bit about what you've got already. Then when you're really thinking about engagement, we actually encourage you to start small. Often when people think about, Seniors for Kids, they think, I want to engage 300 older adults to come out to our event or to write letters to our legislators. And there can be a place for that down the line. That's exciting when we get to that place. But we really encourage you to start by thinking about engaging a few strategic voices. It may be 1 to 2 higher profile people and then 1 to 2 sort of regular folks that people can identify with. And do that through making a few simple asks. And we're going to point to 3 ways, 3 simple things we think you can start with to engaging a few strategic voices. That is having them share their stories through a profile. We'll talk about it. Submitting some opinion pieces through some local press. And then raising their voices by asking a question in a number of forums. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So a couple of simple asks to targeted people. Then it's also important to put out a number of optional other ways to be involved. All of this, of course, is optional, but you want to have choices, but also have some simple intentional asks. So after you've done that sort of starting small, then we encourage you to evaluate, make some mid-course corrections, and decide if you're ready to go bigger from there. And along the way, it's so important to be really celebrating those successes and affirming the value of this work for those that are engaged. Next slide. We have this young woman, or this older woman, talking about how I'm never going to have a street or a building named after me, but trying to improve the education of children. This can be a lasting legacy. So really acknowledging these quotes and how this is benefiting folks along the way. So for starting small, what can this look like? I want to point to just a few key things that we recommend if you're starting this work. Next slide. And that is starting with what we call profiles in caring. We have a strategy that we've used in a number of states where we put together what we call a profile publication. Go ahead. And here's, on the left, you have a publication that we're currently doing to culminate our work in Nebraska, where we're pulling together a number of profiles of some of our Seniors for Kids grandparents as a grandparent network specifically in Nebraska. And on the right, a profile from some of our work in Kentucky. So each of these publications has a group of older adults from various professions and perspectives. And it talks about why, from their perspective, it's important to be investing and advocating for children. So this is one from the first African-American senator in the state senate of Kentucky, Miss Georgia Powers, talking about why it matters to her. If you go to the next slide, I just want to walk through just a couple of different examples, some quotes from some of the other profiles that we've done. The first comes from former Mayor Dinkins from New York and First Lady Joyce Burroughs Dinkins, who just talks about, for older adults, creating a bright and hopeful life for our children is without question the most urgent of our priorities. So just a basic quote from the mayor of one of the largest cities in the U.S. Then next we had, out of Kentucky, we had a gentleman who was a pediatric dentist. He was actually a traveling dentist who went to different rural parts of Kentucky. And for him, the reason that it was really important to be investing in quality early education, for him that meant he could get to the kids earlier. He would travel around to the different facilities providing care and talk to them about taking care of their teeth. So for him, it was a way not only to be investing in education, but also talking to them early about what good healthcare was. We have the First Lady of Nebraska, who comes at this not only as a First Lady, but also because she was an elementary school principal. And she saw what an effect it had to have older adults engaged and recognize that investments in early childhood education, if you go on to the rest of her profile, she could see the gap between those who had it and those that didn't when she was an elementary school principal, and she saw that gap grew and grew over time. And then another one I'll point to is actually from the head of advocacy of AARP Nebraska, who talked about the impact of sequestration and the deficit and saying we really need to be getting together to advocate for these children. And he came at this, of course, as a primary advocate for older adults, but he's also a grandparent. And so he goes on to talk about, the impact and how it's been transformative to him to become a grandparent and watch his granddaughter grow and learn. So these publications pull together folks from high profile to regular folks talking about the importance of investments. And we've shared those in a number of ways, from distributing them to policymakers and also using them as recruitment tools for other older adults. When they see other stories profiled, they start thinking about their keen interest in this work as well. The next strategy is the opinion piece strategy. And we've gone really big in this, and we've also gone smaller. So what you see here is just one letter to the editor that we did last Grandparents' Day. There was an article from the governor in Nebraska who was talking about August being Parent Involvement Month, and we had a grandparent say, well, if we're going to be talking about parent involvement, shouldn't we be talking about grandparent involvement as well? So that was one piece, letter to the editor. Go to the next. We did one in New York a while back when there was a piece that was talking about aligning educational standards with college preparedness and drawing it back to the importance of investing in early childhood and why that matters to someone as an adult. We've also gone bigger than that. In Florida, for example, we were able to get all of the former governors to sign on to a letter in support of investments in early childhood, and similarly in Kentucky, all of the former first ladies did an op-ed with a similar theme. So you can do this in a big way or a smaller way. And then the next strategy is one that's just really making a simple ask of key voices to ask a question at higher profile events or opportunities. So I'll turn that over to Yvonne to talk about.
And the illustration I talked about a bit earlier around the rotunda was actually, I want to actually open that up a little bit. It was a gathering of early education advocates. The rotunda was amazingly full, and the legislators, both in the Senate and the House, found themselves coming out to find out who was it that was actually bringing so much energy to the advocacy efforts, and they began to talk with them, and in fact ended up saying to the advocates, we want to hear from seniors, because in reality they perceived the seniors to be unlikely allies for early education, which of course can be the case whenever you have diminishing resources and all the populations are in such great need. So the older adult voices at the rally actually turned out to be the definitive ones for early education advocates to make the case for their legislators. But of course you could go to a very local activity at a town hall meeting. We actually accomplished one of those up in the northeast part of the state, and you had such a diverse group of folks, but all around the room seniors were talking with folks about the need to support early education. And so just a few seniors in properly designated locations in the room allowed the message to be filtered in a way folks hadn't heard before, at least in that part of the state. We've also convened educational events, and so you might see a back-to-school event, for instance, as being not necessarily being an area where you would bring older adults, but in reality we actually brought older adults to support back to school, and then we, like this picture suggests, we are able to tie in the grandparents and the seniors with the children's activity and begin a more consistent interaction and allow messaging to begin, because that's also a very important part of having your older adults in your advocacy efforts. You want to make sure that they have the right messages and that the recipients of the messages aren't hearing different things. And so it's a good way to really integrate the early education message for older adults. And one of the things that we also did is we took ways that might seem a little less about advocacy, but ended up being advocacy because of the way in which they were presented. So in one part of the state, we had a feel-good day for older adults, but we integrated teens, and the teens were helping the younger children to read, and the older adults were supporting the history lesson for teens. And so you had an intergenerational event that turned into advocacy recruiting moving forward. So it was really positive. Next. And yes, sorry, Jaya.
That's okay. So thank you, Yvonne. So those are sort of three strategies that we encourage folks to consider when starting small with engaging older adults. The profiles, the opinion pieces, and then existing opportunities where you can engage older adults simply to speak or ask a question and elevate their voice. So then the question is, once you've done that, is it right to expand? And so what we recommend after starting there is to revisit the goals of your work, evaluate how that's gone, and then really spend some time assessing the capacity within your organization to take it a step further. To map your assets within the organization, but also within the state, and that's something that we would be happy to do with you. We'll talk a little bit more about our menu of services down the way. But when you're assessing your capacity to really take things a step further, it's going to take some investment if you're looking at doing something that's going to engage much broader numbers of older adults. Next slide. And so with that, we could work together to develop a plan, and if you're looking at a plan that engages much larger numbers of older adults, some of the things that we have done in the states that we've had an stronger on-the-ground presence, we've created formal groups that have honorary co-chairs, which are usually high-profile individuals. We've held events that the older adults have taken a lead on organizing with a focus on older adult engagement and caring about investments in children. And then really to move to the big, broader recruiting effort and engaging grassroots advocacy is the biggest piece. So we really suggest that come after you have a real strong plan and you have a couple of key indicators that you're ready to take it to that level. So we will talk about what those indicators are soon. But if you do look to do some broader grassroots advocacy engagement, Yvonne is going to talk a little bit about some tips for grassroots engagement with older adults.
And so you start with standard, because if you do any engagement, you know there are certain things that have to be considered, and some of these are very, should be highlighted for seniors, flexibility in particular. And and there, you know, you might have to even consider, okay, do we have physical handicap? Do we have facilities that will address and address the need for physical handicap folk, and we have the ability to actually make the environment work for them. And so in addition to that, the other standards, frequencies, and we talked earlier about ask and task, and that is important before you even walk out for your actual activities, because the ask and the task for the seniors have to be so well ingrained so that they are actually comfortable with what it is they need to exchange with elected officials. The opportunities within their own activities. For instance, if in fact you meet the girls every week for tea or wine and cheese, then you have an opportunity there to talk a bit about moving into this area of advocacy for early education. And so there are ways in which you're operating where you are, beginning where you are, and keeping it in the capacity that you have. Also, I just want to say that with these volunteer tips, or the standard tips, you want to start from a position of respect. I mean, you always have to have that base that what you're hearing is something that you're going to integrate into your work. And so you're hearing and then you're integrating that work. And obviously, folks need to feel that they've made an impact and that the work that they're doing really does mean something. So there has to be something built into your engagement work that allows folks to celebrate the wins. Next slide. Specifically around your current work and the connection to your current work. I just want to really underscore it. This is not a new program. You don't want to consider Seniors for Kids a new program, but instead a way to actually get more from your existing programs and utilize your existing resources most effectively. And so you're connecting it to your current work and your programs in children, whatever movements, and we all have missions and movements we're dealing with, but there's a way to utilize those for our engagement. Underscore the need for a strong lead on the ground, because that person really has to be able to work very specifically with all of your other captains and with other folks who are not seniors for kids or captains for kids, but want to know something about the program and do that sort of bridging work. And with the tips, this one always worked for us. Life happens. You're going to have a situation with an older adult where maybe a medical issue occurred. Now, this is not just specifically older adults, but of course it increases a bit when you're reaching 50 plus. So be prepared for it, have backup for things that may happen and you don't have any control, and keep the smile. I hope you hear it through the presentation. Keep your smile. Next. Well, Jackie is basically underscoring what we've talked about, and that's really, some of the benefits for Seniors for Kids and the whole notion of helping people stay out of depression. All of the studies indicate when seniors are more involved, then you're going to have diminished issues with depression. And so Jackie is just underscoring, and we appreciate her bringing that information to the table. And the next slide does the same thing, and that is with Miss Linda, who, she's really reminding us that we need to connect. And if we do, then probably everyone's going to be better off. What I would indicate is that not only are we going to be better off, and the benefits for older adults are going to be apparent, but then there's going to be positive outcomes, increased positive outcomes for your advocacy work. And so Linda is making it happen there. Thank you, Jaya.
Great. So after that those helpful tips from Yvonne, what does this mean for your work? So as I indicated in the beginning, what we are offering as Generations United is a menu of services that are available to the Alliance Network. And so I've alluded to them, but want to just talk a little bit more specifically about what they are. If you're interested in embarking some work to engage age as advocates for children, we would be happy to work with you to jointly identify and assess the goals for this work and develop a plan. So we know that you have goals and strategies for your work, and we would like to sort of talk with you about which piece of your goals are most logical to be engaging older adults around. Then we would jointly identify and reach out to key older adult voices. So we would want to be thinking, all right, if you want to be profiling 3 older adults in your state, strategically, who are the first 3 that we should be starting with, and do some outreach. Usually it's a joint process. We have some ideas. We welcome ideas from you, but we really are looking to you as the state expert, of course, to give us some insight into who key individuals are and to help us to sort of navigate the politics of the state. From there, we would do the interviews and write up the profiles with the older adults about why they support children, and put those pieces together in a consumable format, and share them strategically with insights from you about where to best distribute them. Do they go to policymakers? Do they go to other key decision makers in the state? And then there's, of course, some electronic and social media venues to be pushing the word out as well. And then work with either it may be those people that were individually identified in the profiles, or there might be some others who we've identified that would be folks that we would sort of call on to be on call to elevate their voices when opportunities arise for opinion pieces. So it might be that we work with them on doing an op-ed, or based on their profile, Or it might be that we have them on call to do a quick turnaround letter to the editor when an issue comes up in a local paper that seems like we could make a logical tie. And we, of course, are happy to draft or ghostwrite those letters to the editor and speak with the individual to make sure that they're comfortable and it is in a voice that is theirs. And then, in addition to that, other opportunities to elevate voices, whether it be a town hall meeting or an event that your organization is having, and you want to make sure that a grandparent is saying, you know what, I'm here as a grandparent and I care about this issue because, really sort of building into the work that you already have going to make sure that there's an older adult voice and a presence at those venues. So those opportunities, and then we're happy to work with you on sort of mapping what other older adult assets you have in your state. There might be groups that you're aware of but have never connected to, so to make that connection. We do have membership of national senior organizations, older adult organizations, and we can work through them at the national level to connect down to their membership in your state and try to build connections that way as well. So we might be able to help connect with potential grassroots if you're eventually looking at that sort of grassroots strategy as an ultimate goal. And then we're happy to work with you on readiness for next steps. So if you're finding some success in this sort of starting small model and want to look at a broader engagement strategy that looks more like some of the more intensive on-the-ground work that we've seen in the states that we've spent more time in, we'd be happy to have a conversation with you about what that might look like, what might be the most effective and strategic. So that is our menu of services. And then the next question is, are you ready? As you've been listening to this, how do you evaluate the readiness of your organization to be engaging older adults in this way? And the first question is, have you really identified ways that older adults can uniquely help you achieve your goals? We know that you have goals already. There are a number of sort of unlikely ally strategies out there. I know that in a number of states that we've worked in, not only have we been there, but there's also been groups like Fight Crime, Invest in Kids, the Military Readiness Group, Business Roundtables. There's other unlikely ally strategies, and we are delighted by that and love to work with those groups as well. But we also want to be very strategic that we are complementing those efforts and that we're thinking about what is the unique niche of highlighting these unlikely advocates in their role as a grandparent or as an older adult that's distinct from some of those other unlikely allies. So we're happy to think through that with you, but that's a key question to be asking, to ask if you're ready. Also, has your organization already made an effort to engage older adults in some way? And if you have, how has that gone? If it hasn't been successful, we want to know, get more information about that, think about what adaptation needs to happen, and what the implications are if you've already made an attempt and haven't had success. What does that mean about sort of the attitude around this, the interest in this within your organization and your work? We want to make sure that we address that head on so that we can be really building a model that's going to be set up for success in our work together. And that sort of certainly feeds into the question of organizational buy-in. If this is an idea that one person thinks is a good idea and no one else in the organization really believes in it, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be a tough sell. So what we can be doing to make sure that there is organizational buy-in or to build it before you really start moving forward. So again, we're setting up this work for success. And then in addition to that, what is the staff capacity? So there really, at a minimum, needs to be a lead person that is the key contact and is committed to doing this work. And it really is great to have some communication support within your organization as well. If you're at an organization that doesn't have a communication staff person, that's okay. We can work with that. What we don't want is to be going into an organization and have a communications person that isn't aware of what we're doing. We want to just make sure that there is that we do have some connection with the communication staff and there's some buy-in from them as well. so that there's a partnership there and it's teamwork. So just to ask some staff capacity questions and buy-in from the organization, those two pieces go hand in hand. So those are really the 4 questions that we encourage you to ask and that we would like to talk through with you if you're interested in doing this work. And from there, if there is interest, we'd very much love to engage in a partnership with you. So we'll end on a quote that really speaks to the value of engaging people of all age levels and points to why we've seen so many older adults interested in doing this work, whether you're a preschooler, a young teen, a graduating college senior, or a retired person. We human beings all want to know that we're acceptable and that our being alive somehow makes a difference in the lives of others. And that, of course, is from Mr. Rogers. So we will end there. This is our information. If folks are interested in next steps working with us, we encourage you to contact Yvonne. And Yvonne's contact information is on the screen here. Email is best for her. So from there, we do have a few minutes if there are any questions from the field. Please go ahead and ask. Okay, and we're pulling up some questions from the written question bar. Does it take convincing to get older adults to participate? Yeah, and I think I'm going to turn that one to Yvonne based on your recruitment experience.
Yeah, it takes convincing, but not to the extent where you're twisting someone's arm. It really is a matter of how you approach and understand a person's personal position. So I guess what I mean to say there is, let's say you're talking to a volunteer that you already have working in your office, and they're a grandparent. They've told you all about their grandchild. They're showing you pictures and that sort of thing. Well, you would probably be very successful if you utilize an approach where you tied the work to the child. And so it might sound like this. Do you know that we have quality initiatives that are across the country, but our state only has this available? And do you know that the children are unable and have no access to this level of care? So whatever your actual facts are, you're going to connect with their life. And once you find out what that is, then you really don't have to convince. Immediately folks come out and say, well, that's horrendous. We need people really helping policymakers to prioritize the resources in a way that will help our children. So I guess that I want to underscore, it's understanding who are the people that you're talking to. What is their position? What is their current life like? And then tying your advocacy work to that.
Great. Thank you, Yvonne. The next question is, how can I link, or how can I link others to your existing network to stay connected and learn more? And I think the easiest way to respond to that is to sign up on our website. We do have 2 places you can go to sign up. One is on your screen right now, www.gu.org. Somehow I managed not to also put up the Seniors for Kids website, which should be included as well. www.seniorsforkids.org is an additional place where you can click the Sign Up tab and sign up as well. So either of those options will take you to a place where you can sign up for Seniors for Kids alerts, which come out monthly with tips for older adult engagement. And with that, I think that's the questions that we have. I want to let folks know that if you know of somebody else who you think might have been interested in this webinar within the network, we know we had a number of others that were interested in participating but weren't able to be on live today, that we are recording the webinar, and we will be sharing a link of the recording with the Alliance listserv shortly. So that'll be available as an ongoing tool if you want to revisit a piece of it. And with that, I just want to say thanks so much to those that participated. We do hope that we hear from you and look forward to working with you to look at ways to engage age for advocacy and impact. Thank you.